Fired for paying $8 of gas for a struggling mom. The truth about who she really was left me speechless. You know that feeling when you're watching your life fall apart in slow motion? Like watching a car crash frame by frame, knowing you can't stop it, but unable to look away. That was me at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing behind the counter of a Shell station off I-95, watching my future evaporate over $8. Let me back up. Name's Jake Carter, and at 24, I was living the classic American dream. That dream involved instant ramen, student loans that could buy a small yacht, and working graveyard shifts while studying accounting during the day. The gas station gig paid $12.50 an hour, which in North Carolina meant I could afford rent, food, and occasionally splurge on name-brand cereal. Living large, right? The station was my domain from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 5 nights a week. I ruled over this fluorescent-lit kingdom of energy drinks, beef jerky, and questionable hot dogs that had been rotating on those metal rollers since forever. The job wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on while I finished my degree. Plus, night shift meant dealing with fewer people, which suited me fine. My boss, Mark Phillips, was what you'd call a metrics guy, mid-40s. Always wore polo shirts tucked into khakis like he was heading to a country club instead of managing gas stations. The man could turn anything into a spreadsheet. Customer satisfaction? There's a metric for that. Bathroom cleanliness? Got a formula. Human decency? Well, that one wasn't in his Excel files. Phillips had this saying he loved to repeat during our monthly video calls. He'd lean into his webcam, coffee breath practically coming through the screen, and declare that metrics don't lie. Numbers were his religion, and efficiency was his gospel. 2 weeks before that November night, he'd written me up for spending 17 minutes helping an elderly couple figure out their GPS 17 minutes that could have been spent restocking or cleaning, according to his time efficiency chart. The second warning came when I let a kid use a bathroom, without buying anything. His mom's car had broken down half a mile up the road. Phillips saw it on the security footage during his random audits. Apparently, bathroom access had a direct correlation to purchase probability, and I'd violated protocol. Strike 2. That Tuesday started like any other. The temperature had dropped into the 30s, unusual for November even by Carolina standards. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and settles in your bones. Around 2:45 a.m., the door chimed. A woman walked in, maybe mid-30s, wearing a tired-looking coat over scrubs. Nurse, probably, heading home from a late shift. She moved with that particular exhaustion I recognized from my mom, the kind that comes from working too many hours for too little appreciation. Through the window, I could see her Honda Civic, probably a 2008 model, with a car seat in the back and one of those stick-figure family decals, except the dad figure had been scraped off. Story told itself right there. She prepaid for pump 3, sliding her debit card through the reader. It beeped. Declined. She tried again. Same result. Then came the credit card shuffle. You know the dance. Trying different cards, hoping one might magically work. Nothing. She looked at the display showing $32 for a full tank, then at me, then back at her wallet. Started counting bills and change. $24 and some coins. $8 short. $8 between her, and a full tank to get through the rest of her week. Something twisted in my chest. See, I knew that counting. My mom did the same dance when I was 12, standing at a Kroger checkout, removing items one by one while the line behind us grew. Mac and cheese back on the shelf. Store-brand bread instead of name-brand. The shame in her eyes while she pretended it didn't matter, telling me we were just being smart shoppers. The woman started putting bills back in her wallet, calculating how far $24 of gas would get her. She forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, and asked for just $20 instead. Keep the change the next time, she said, like there'd definitely be a next time when $4 would matter less. Here's where I made my $8 mistake, or my $8 decision, depending on how you look at it. The register system at the station was state-of-the-art, according to Phillips. Every transaction logged, every penny tracked, inventory monitored in real time. The beauty of modern technology, he called it. Couldn't slip a candy bar past this system if you tried. But I wasn't thinking about the system right then. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a 10, and slipped it into the register. Told her the car went through after all. Must have been a glitch. System does that sometimes, I said. She looked confused, checking her phone for the transaction, but I just waved her toward the pump. Sometimes a notification takes a minute, I assured her. Total lie, but it came out smooth as butter. She thanked me 3 times, and each thank you hit harder than the last. Nobody should have to be that grateful for $8. She headed out to pump 3, and I watched her fill up the tank completely, checking her phone twice more for that transaction that would never appear. The register knew, though. The moment I closed it, the system flagged a discrepancy. $8 over in cash, no corresponding transaction. But worse, the fuel inventory showed $32 of gas dispensed from pump 3 with no payment authorization. The kind of double irregularity that sends an immediate alert to management. 5 minutes. That's how long it took for my phone to buzz. Phillips didn't even wait for an explanation. His voice through the phone was cold, efficient, like he was reading from a script. The system flagged a discrepancy, Carter. Product dispensed from pump 3 with no clear payment, and an unexplained cash overage. That's theft and fraud on 2 counts. Third documented incident of policy violation. Per company guidelines, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Leave the keys on the counter. Clock out. Don't return. I asked if he wanted to hear what happened. He said the numbers told him everything he needed to know. Metrics don't lie, Carter. Then he hung up. The woman was still pumping gas when I took off my name tag and set it next to the register. The overnight stocker, Tommy, was in the back. I told him corporate was sending someone to cover the rest of my shift, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into that Carolina cold. She was just pulling away from the pump when I reached my beat-up Corolla. For a second, our eyes met through her window. She gave me a small wave, and I watched her taillights disappear down I-95, carrying her and her kid toward whatever morning was waiting for them. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, watching my breath fog up the windshield. For years of night shifts, for years of perfect attendance, for years of dealing with drunks, tweakers, and lonely truckers, gone over $8 in a spreadsheet that couldn't calculate human decency. The Waffle House across the street was still open, its yellow sign fighting against the darkness. I thought about going in, ordering hash browns and coffee, maybe figuring out what came next. But I didn't have $8 to spare either. Funny how that works. I drove home in silence, no radio, just the sound of my tires on cold asphalt. The dashboard clock read 3:47 a.m. when I pulled into my apartment complex. 7 hours until my accounting class. A class I was taking to get a degree, to get a better job, to never have to choose between $8 and doing the right thing. My roommate was asleep when I got in. I sat at our rickety kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee that tasted like disappointment and stared out the window at the empty parking lot. Streetlights created small pools of yellow in the darkness. Somewhere out there, a woman was driving home with a full tank of gas. Somewhere, Mark Phillips was probably sleeping soundly, dreaming in spreadsheets and efficiency reports. And here I was, unemployed at 24, holding a cup of cold coffee and feeling oddly at peace. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd finally done something that mattered, even if it cost me everything, even if nobody would ever know except me and a tired woman who got home safe that night. The thing about hitting rock bottom at 4 a.m. is that you start questioning everything. Like whether cup noodles counts as a vegetable if you add frozen peas. Or if your accounting degree will ever matter when you can't even hold down a gas station job. I was deep in this philosophical spiral, nursing my 3rd cup of terrible instant coffee, when my entire life took a turn I couldn't have predicted if you'd given me a crystal ball and a psychic hotline. My apartment complex wasn't much to look at. 12 units, peeling paint, and a parking lot that looked like the surface of the moon. The kind of place where everyone's either starting out or starting over. Which is why the Rolls-Royce Ghost that pulled up at 4:47 a.m. stood out like a tuxedo at a tailgate party. This wasn't just any luxury car. This thing was so black, it seemed to absorb the streetlight, like someone had cut a car-shaped hole in reality and parked it outside my building. The engine didn't rumble or purr, it whispered. Money doesn't need to shout. I watched from my kitchen window as the driver's door opened. My brain short-circuited. It was her, the woman from the gas station. Same tired eyes, but now wearing a coat that probably cost more than my semester's tuition. Behind her, an older man emerged from the passenger side, moving with the deliberate grace of someone who'd never rushed for anything in his life. They looked at my building, checked something on a phone, then headed for my door. My door. Second floor, apartment 2B. The one with the Amazon package that had been sitting outside for 3 days because I kept forgetting to grab it. The knock was soft but certain. The kind of knock that knows you'll answer. I opened the door still holding my coffee mug, wearing the same jeans from my shift and a t-shirt that advertised a 5K run I'd never actually participated in. The woman stood there with a slight smile, and now I could see the family resemblance with the man beside her. Same sharp cheekbones, same intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. First thing out of my mouth wasn't hello, or can I help you? It was how did you find me? Real smooth Carter. The woman, who introduced herself as Clara Harrison, had this amused look, like she'd expected the question. She explained that she'd seen my name tag before I'd taken it off. Jake Carter, clear as day. When she'd realized what happened, the declined card, the mysterious approval, then watching me leave the station with no replacement coming, she'd called her father. Finding an employee's address isn't exactly FBI-level detective work when you own the company. The words, own the company, hit different at 4 a.m. when you're standing in your doorway, wearing yesterday's clothes, and holding coffee that tastes like regret. The man extended his hand. Richard Harrison. The actual Richard Harrison, whose signature was on my termination paperwork somewhere in the digital void. His handshake was firm but not aggressive. The grip of someone who had nothing to prove. He asked if we could come in. Not demanded, not assumed, asked. I led them to my living room, which was really just a corner of the main room with a couch I'd gotten free from Craigslist and a coffee table held level by a statistics textbook under one leg. Clara sat down without hesitation. Richard examined the room like he was reading my biography in the water stains on the ceiling and the stack of overdue bills on the counter. Then he started talking, and everything I thought I knew about corporate America went out the window. Richard Harrison started his career at 19, mopping floors at a Texaco station in Burlington, worked his way up to cashier, then assistant manager, then manager. Saved every penny. Bought his first station at 31 with a loan that kept him awake at night for 3 years. Now he owned 217 stations across the Southeast. The American Dream version 2.0. But here's where it got interesting. He said he'd been watching his company change over the past 5 years. Not growing, changing. The soul was leaking out of it, replaced by algorithms and efficiency reports. Managers like Phillips, who could tell you the profit margin on a Snickers bar, but couldn't tell you the name of the kid who bought it. Clara had called him from the parking lot of my station, told him the whole story. The $8, the way I'd cover for her without making her feel small about it. The fact that I'd walked away from my job rather than let her drive home on fumes. He'd pulled her transaction history while driving over. 3 years of purchases at various stations in his network. Always during late shifts, always small amounts. Always stretching to make it work. Single mom, nursing degree, doing her best. Then he'd pulled my employee file. For years, perfect attendance until tonight. 2 warnings, both for helping customers beyond the scope of efficiency protocols. Studying accounting while working nights. Living in an apartment that, based on the address, he knew meant I was barely making it myself. He stood up, walked to my window, looked out of the parking lot where his Rolls sat among the beaten-down Hondas and Fords like a spacecraft among covered wagons. Then he turned back to me with eyes that had seen every angle of the American hustle. His next words changed my life. He said that what I did tonight was rare. Not the helping part. Plenty of people want to help, but the helping when it cost me everything, with no expectation of return, no audience applaud, no social media post to collect likes. Just human decency at its market price. $8 and a job. He said he'd built his empire on a simple principle. The difference between a good business and a great one isn't in the spreadsheets. It's in the moments when nobody's watching. And Phillips, for all his metrics and efficiency, had just fired the kind of person Richard had spent 40 years looking for. Then came the offer. Not a job, a challenge. He wanted to make me manager of the same station I'd just been fired from. Phillips would be reassigned, effective immediately. But here's the kicker. He wasn't giving me a salary bump or a company car or any of the usual perks. Instead, he proposed something that made my accounting student brain light up like a pinball machine. Any profit above the station's current baseline for the next 12 months would be mine. All of it. If I increased profits by $10,000, I kept $10,000. If I increased them by $50,000, that was mine too. But if I failed, if the numbers dropped, I'd be out with nothing but the base manager's salary to show for it. He called it venture capitalism at the street level, a bet on rare things. Clara watched me process this, probably seeing the calculator in my head running numbers. The station's current profit was about $300,000 annually. Even a 10% increase would mean $30,000 in my pocket. That was more than I'd make in a year at my current former pay rate. But Richard wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, showed me the station's numbers for the past 3 years. Steady but flat. Phillips had maintained the status quo, kept things efficient, but there was no growth, no innovation, no soul. The community around the station had grown by 30%, but the station's revenue hadn't budged. He asked me what I saw in those numbers. I told him I saw a business that had forgotten it was part of a neighborhood. He smiled for the first time since walking in. The contract was simple. 1 page, which Richard drafted right there on my laptop while Clara made herself coffee with my instant crystals without a single complaint. Starting salary of $42,000 as base manager pay. Any profits above the current baseline were mine to keep. Full operational control within company guidelines. 1-year trial period. I asked why he was doing this. Really doing it. Not the venture capitalism angle, but why he'd driven to my apartment at dawn to offer a failed gas station clerk a golden ticket. He told me about his first station, how he'd nearly lost it in year 2 because he'd focused so hard on the numbers that he'd forgotten the people. An old-timer named Earl had set him straight, told him that a gas station wasn't really about gas. It was about being a reliable constant in people's routines, the place you could count on when everything else was variables. Earl had been dead 15 years, but Richard still heard his voice every time he looked at a profit report that forgot to factor in the human element. And tonight, Clara had called him about a kid who'd instinctively understood what Richard had spent decades learning. Clara added something then. She said she'd driven back to check on me before calling her father. Sat in the parking lot and watched me walk to my car in the cold. No drama, no scene, just accepting the consequence of doing the right thing. That's when she knew I was worth the call. They both stood to leave. Richard handed me a business card with his personal cell number. Not his office, not his assistant, his actual number. He said Phillips would get the call at 8 a.m. and I could start whenever I was ready, but he suggested I take the weekend to think about what kind of station I wanted to run. Before they left, Clara turned back at the door. She said thank you again, but differently this time. Not the desperate gratitude from earlier, but something deeper. She said her daughter had been sick all week, and she'd been running on fumes in more ways than one. That $8 meant she could get home without stopping, could be there when her kid woke up, could be a mom instead of a statistic. After they left, I sat in my empty apartment and laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that starts in your chest and bubbles up without permission. 6 hours ago, I'd been fired for theft and fraud. Now I was management with a profit-sharing deal that could change my life. I looked at the business card Richard had left, embossed letters on cream-colored stock that felt expensive just a touch. At the bottom, below his name and number, was a single line, "Fortune favors the bold." But someone, probably Richard himself, had crossed out bold in pen and written kind instead. The first thing I did after they left wasn't sleep. It was call my mom. It was 5:30 a.m., but she answered on the second ring. already up and getting ready for her shift at the hospital cafeteria. I told her everything. The $8, the firing, the Rolls-Royce, the offer. She was quiet for a long moment, then said something I'll never forget. She said that when I was 12 and she was counting change at Kroger, removing items from our cart, I tried to sneak a Snickers bar into the pile with my birthday money. She caught me, made me put it back, not because we couldn't afford it, but because she wanted me to understand that dignity wasn't about having money. It was about how you acted when you didn't have it. And tonight, I'd proven I'd learned the lesson. I spent the rest of that morning at my kitchen table with a legal pad, sketching out ideas. What if a gas station could be more than a pit stop? What if it could be a comma in people's daily sentence instead of just a period? By the time the sun came up, I had pages of notes. But one idea, written in capital letters at the top, kept drawing my eye back. The trust pump. Monday morning, I walked into my old station as a new manager. The morning shift guy, Carlos, nearly dropped his coffee when he saw me. Phillips had apparently called in sick, permanently reassigned to a desk job in corporate, I later learned. The staff meeting I called was short. I told them we were going to try something different. Not corporate different, but actually different. The trust pump started as a mason jar I bought at Target for $6. I put $20 of my own money in it and set it next to the register with a simple sign. Short on gas money for the trip home? Take what you need. Got a little extra? Leave what you can. The first week, that jar got more suspicious looks than a politician at a truth convention. People would read the sign, look at me, look at the jar, then back at me like they were waiting for the catch. One guy actually asked if it was some kind of sting operation. But here's the thing about trust. It's contagious. Once one person used it, others followed. I remember this construction worker, Miguel, who took $3 on a Thursday when his check was late. The next Monday, he put in 10. Told me he wanted to make sure someone else could get help if they needed it. That's when I knew we were onto something. But the trust pump was just the beginning. I made a deal with Sunrise Bakery down the street. Their day-old pastries were our counter at cost, but we'd push their coffee cake hard. Win-win. Replace the corporate Muzak with a classic rock station, the local one WRNR, where Big Eddie did the morning show and actually mentioned local traffic. Got rid of those harsh fluorescent bulbs in the customer area, put in warmer lights. Cost me $300 of my own money, but the place stopped feeling like an interrogation room. Added a couple of real plants. Not those sad plastic things, but actual greenery that Carlos's wife taught us how to keep alive. Then there was Red McCaffrey, 73 years old, been driving trucks since before I was born. Gray beard like Santa's rougher brother, hands like leather gloves, and stories that could make you laugh until your ribs hurt. He'd been stopping at our station for years, but always just for gas. Never came inside. 3 weeks into my management, Red walked through those doors at 5 a.m., looked around at the changes, grunted, and poured himself a cup of coffee. Real coffee, from the La Colombe machine I'd leased with my own credit card because corporate's Maxwell House wasn't cutting it. He took a sip, his eyes widened, and he actually smiled. From then on, Red was there every morning he wasn't on the road. He'd sit at the counter I'd made from an old door and 2 sawhorses, drink his coffee, and hold court. Other regulars started timing their stops to catch Red's stories. The one about the tornado in Kansas. The time he delivered a baby in his cab because the hospital was too far. The night he talked to jump her off a bridge with nothing but a thermos of coffee and patience. One morning, about 2 months in, Red walked up to the trust pump and dropped in a crumpled $5 bill. I started to tell him he didn't need to do that, but he held up his hand. He said something I'll never forget. Son, I've been driving this route for 30 years. Stopped at maybe 1,000 different stations. This is the first one that feels like home. That's worth more than $5, but it's what I got. The numbers started reflecting what we were building. First month, we were up 12%. Second month, 23%. By month 3, we'd hit 40% above baseline. People were driving past 3 other stations to fill up with us. Not because our gas was cheaper, it wasn't. Not because we had better selection, we didn't. But because we had something you couldn't put in a spreadsheet. We had community. Corporate noticed. How could they not? Our little station off I-95 was suddenly outperforming locations twice our size. The district reports looked like someone had made a typing error. Richard Harrison called me personally after the third-month numbers came in. All he said was keep doing what you're doing. Then came the day Mark Phillips showed up. It was month 4, a Tuesday afternoon. He pulled up in his Audi, the silver one he'd leased to show everyone he'd made it to middle management. Walked in wearing his polo and khakis uniform, that same superior smile he'd worn when he fired me. The place was packed. Red was telling a story to a group of college kids. Maria, the nurse who worked nights at the hospital, was grabbing her usual afternoon coffee. The trust pump sat on the counter, about $40 visible through the glass. Phillips looked around, and I saw him calculating, trying to figure out the angle. He walked up to me with that smirk, asked how the charity business was working out, wanted to know what metrics I was using to track the trust pump's ROI. I just pointed to the jar and told him that was my metric. It measures something spreadsheets can't, the difference between a business and a community. He didn't say another word, just paid for his gas and left. But I saw him looking back in his rearview mirror as he pulled away, and for the first time since I'd known him, Mark Phillips looked confused. 6 months in, Richard Harrison invited me to headquarters in Charlotte. Not the regional office, the actual headquarters. 22nd floor, corner office. The kind of view that makes you understand why people chase money. But Richard wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at a presentation on his screen. My station's numbers, but more than that, customer testimonials. Pictures people had posted online. An article from the local paper about the trust pump. He turned to me and said 7 words that changed my trajectory again. I want you to scale this up. Regional manager for the Southeast. 37 stations. My job would be to bring the trust pump model to every single one. Not the jar, that was just a symbol, but the philosophy. The idea that a gas station could be a third place, not home, not work, but something essential in between. I took the job. Of course I did. The challenge was too good to pass up. But I had one condition. I wanted to keep managing my original station too. Richard laughed, said I'd be too busy. I told him that station was my compass. If I lost touch with it, I'd lose touch with why any of this mattered. He agreed. 5 years. That's how long it took to go from fired night shift clerk to vice president of operations for the Eastern Seaboard. The trust pump became an official company program. Not mandated. That would have killed it, but encouraged, supported, funded. Over 70% of our stations adopted some version of it. Company profits were up 18% overall. Richard Harrison became even richer, but more importantly, he'd proved his point. Business wasn't just about numbers. It was about people. My office in Charlotte is nice. Real nice. 18th floor, leather chairs. A desk that cost more than I made in 3 months at the gas station. But on the wall, in a simple black frame, hangs 2 things. That original $8 receipt from the night that changed everything, and below it, a photo of my mom from her last birthday. She retired last year. I made sure of that. But the best part of success isn't the office or the salary, or even being able to take care of my mom. It's the nights when I can't sleep, when the weight of managing hundreds of stations and thousands of employees keeps my mind spinning. On those nights, I drive, and I always end up at the same place. My original station off I-95. It's different now. Better coffee machines, nicer lighting, a proper seating area where Red's counter used to be. But the trust pump still sits by the register. Same mason jar, or one just like it. Never empty, never overflowing, just quietly doing its job. Last week, I was there at 3 a.m., drinking coffee that actually tasted good, when I saw him. College kid, probably 20, standing at the register with that look I knew too well. The dance between his wallet and his hope, calculating if he had enough to get home for Thanksgiving. His card declined. He started to put things back. I walked over, caught the night manager's eye, a young woman named Patricia, who'd started as cashier 2 years ago. Just nodded at her. She understood immediately, rang into the company's emergency fund we'd set up for exactly these moments. The kid started to stammer his thanks, promise he'd pay it back. I just told him what I tell everyone in that situation. Don't worry about paying it back. Just pay it forward when you can. He left with a full tank and enough snacks for the drive to Virginia. I watched his taillights disappear into the night and thought about Clara Harrison, about Richard's faith in rare things, about Red and his $5, about my mom's dignity lessons at Kroger. Then I looked at that trust pump, still doing its quiet work, and realized something that would have made my accounting professors cringe. That night 5 years ago, I didn't spend $8. I invested them, and a return on that investment wasn't measured in percentages or profit margins. It was measured in moments like this, in communities built, in trust restored. $8. That's all it took to learn that sometimes the best business decision has nothing to do with business at all. Sometimes it's just about being human, when the world's watching, but more importantly, when it's not. The trust pump sits there still, in stations across the Southeast now. Each one started with someone putting in the first bill, taking the first leap of faith. And every time I see one, I remember that cold November night, when I made a choice that seemed to cost me everything. Turns out, it gave me everything instead. Metrics don't lie, Phillips used to say. He was right. But here's what he never understood. Not everything that counts can be counted. And not everything that can be counted actually counts. $8 taught me that. $8 in a woman who just needed to get home to her sick kid. That's a metric that beats any spreadsheet, any day of the week.